Folks, welcome back to What's Next Beyond Service. Today is episode number 39. Hard to believe we're already at 39, and it's entitled "The Spouses Run the Houses" and so much more. And if you're in the military, if you're prior military, and you were married during that time, you absolutely understand what that means. There's so much to being a military spouse that most other folks that aren't associated with military don't necessarily understand. You're running a business essentially when it comes to all the logistics and planning and learning a new language and all the things that come with being in the military because you served as your spouse does too. Especially if you have kids, this gets more complex. So today, with that being said, our guest is Michelle Lang. Michelle, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to tell on Michelle here a bit. I'm sure she'll be okay with it, but they are in the middle of a move, right? They're moving their home. And if anyone who has ever moved and had kids and also is, pregnant, and, that's moving in general is tough. But when you have these other things happening, it's just not a good time to do an interview, right? But Michelle was like, we're doing this, so she's a go-getter, and we're blessed to have her on the program. And so I just wanted to thank you publicly for putting aside a little bit of time to talk to us today, to talk about what you're doing in the veteran space, which we'll get to. So, yeah, again, thank you for being here today. So, a little bit about Michelle. Michelle is she has 2 degrees. She went to uh, June Anita. Is that pronounced correctly? June Anita?
Juniata.
Juniata. Okay, I was close.
Yeah.
I even looked at that before. That's
No,
terrible.
I mean, I used to work for the volleyball team. So even whenever we would go to away matches, they'd be Juanita College. And it's like, really? You didn't look
Yeah.
at that before? But yeah,
Well,
it's so
yeah.
common.
I wouldn't, especially being out here on the West Coast in Southern California, when you see a name like that, you're thinking, is it a Spanish pronunciation, And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I don't, you would think I would know Spanish by now. I mean, I know, a little bit, not much, but I think I probably knew more Japanese when I was in Okinawa than than I know,
Yeah.
Spanish, and I've been living here for quite a while. So I guess that says something about me, but but anyhow, so getting back to what I was saying. So you went to college. It's in PA, and
Mhm.
you have 2 degrees. You have two bachelors of science. Uh, One is in sports management with an emphasis in exercise science, and the other is a business management with the same emphasis in exercise science, right?
Well, they're combined. So
Okay.
this
Okay.
college is like a hippie liberal arts school. So I got to create my own major. They have an option where you create your own major if you don't like, if you don't want to go into biology or whatever. So I created my own, I forget what they call it now. It's not, they don't even call them majors. It's program of emphasis is what it is. So I had my own
Okay.
program of emphasis,
Wow.
and I got to do the sports management side, which is essentially business management, and then the exercise science side, which I went to England to do that portion. And I also got to work with like our sports and conditioning coach there, who is like one of the best in the country. I think he has the most, anyway, he's a really, really cool guy. So I got to learn a
Right.
ton about exercise science from him. My ambition was to be a D1 strength and conditioning coach. But then my friend who was doing it told me that, yeah, you kind of have to like live in your car and like get your stuff out. And I was like, I'm gonna pump the brakes on that a little bit. I don't think I wanna,
Right.
I'm not like that ambitious. I'll figure something else out and get a job and you know, work at my classes while I'm working. But
Sure.
that's not really the way the industry works.
Right. To that point, it's interesting how with when you're getting a degree, if you're getting a, maybe a standard degree, you may have a better path in terms of what your progress may look like. But, sometimes you get into a degree and you focus on it, and, then you're ready to roll. And then you realize there's things about it that you had no idea that are, associated with the things you've got to do in that career field. And then people are like, okay, wow, I'm going to rethink, what I'm going to do. And then they, kind of realign what they're looking to do, and then they move on. And it happens all the time. In fact, my youngest daughter is getting a master's now, and she's just finished her first year, and so she goes in Canada. I think I shared that with you. And so program, as she's seeing where things are going, I'm not saying she's ready to reconsider, but I mean, there's some things that have come up that she's just kind of like, but she's halfway through. So, what do you do? So,
Yeah.
she's got some thinking to do here. So, well, so good. So you've got your degrees there from your college in Pennsylvania, and I don't want to say it again because I'll probably say it wrong. But and then you're also you're a military spouse. Your husband's in the Army; he's an officer in the Army, and your current position, your current role is as founder and president of Veteran Help Point, which, and I'll just kind of thumbnail it here for the audience because we're going to get into this, but essentially you're pointing military families to resources in their local and regional areas that can help them in all the things that people in the military face, particularly military families. Sometimes finding resources can be difficult. And so you're a help point, which is a great name, by the way. And now in our conversations, and this is a get out of jail card for me because I do talk to so many folks when it comes to interviewing. I'm trying to recall, or have you obtained your nonprofit yet? Is that where you're going? I just, getting old man syndrome here.
Yeah, no, we it actually came through really fast. So we got the letter that we are 501c3 back in
Perfect.
March now. So technically since November, that's whenever we started, November 2021.
Hmm.
We are a 501c3 nonprofit.
That's fantastic. And well, that came in what, 5 months, maybe 4 or 5 months
Yeah, I was really
from the time
nervous
you
about that.
submitted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those days, and ours actually went through pretty quick. The partner, one of my partners, he's a very good writer, and he's just, if he does something, he's going to go times 10. So he submitted it well, he followed up well, and surprisingly, ours went through pretty quick too. I've heard stories where it takes quite a while, and then you
Yeah.
have to go back and get more information or whatever. So that's, that's a blessing when that happens. So that's great. So that means that as you're going forward, there's folks that can contribute. Of course, people that volunteer, folks that want to potentially sponsor. And there's different ways to sponsor. In addition to providing funds to help your organization. So that's great. That you were able to do that. So, well, let's do this, Michelle. Let's talk a little bit about you, so that folks that will see this can get to know you a little bit and understand your backstory. So, if you can just, kind of spend a little bit of time, whatever it is you want to share with us, kind of telling us who you are, and then bringing us up to, we'll transition from that point and we'll start talking about, being a military spouse. So let's do it.
Sure. So I graduated college in 2013, and then a couple months after that, I landed my first, big girl job, and it was for our local hospital as a community health and wellness coordinator there. So what I got to do was basically analyze the community data, work with community partners, and then see what areas were lacking in, what needed help, and what resources I could find, like government programs or grants, because the hospital is a nonprofit. We could, pull into our community and help kind of cover those gaps. We lived in a really rural area, so we had problems with kids that didn't eat lunch. They didn't eat during the summer if they weren't provided a school lunch. We
Wow.
lived in a food desert, so that means you cannot walk to a grocery store. Um, and I mean, we are very rural. So there's a lot of interesting problems and resources out there that the government handed, were able to give to us. And that's kind of my thought process on Veteran Help Point is a lot of the United States is rural, and we typically only think about these cities, but where I'm from in Pennsylvania, that whole 2-hour radius, there are not cities around. And so how are you going to find these resources? And those resources that are there, they don't advertise well. Even in my town, the websites are not good. It's just a
Right.
small town thing, but there are people out there to help. So anyway, I met my husband because he's from the same town that I went to college in, the same
Oh,
tiny
wow.
town. So I met him, and then 8 months later, I decided I was going to quit my job and move up to Fort Drum with him. So I had this idea that I was going to work in the fitness industry up at Fort Drum, and that as a, what are you? You're not a spouse. As a person affiliated with the military that has no military background, I'm not a veteran, I'm not a spouse, I'm not, anything, super hard to get a job on base. And
Yeah.
I even had people pulling strings for me. So that was really, really difficult. So I threw myself into jobs. The only job that I could get was working at Zales at first, even though I lied on all, all of my job interviews. They're like, "Are you affiliated with the military?" No, not at all. I would put like that I've been living there for 5 years, and I made it to third round interviews for jobs that I was doing at my hometown, and was perfect for me in Watertown. But then got to the end, they figured out I'm a military spouse, and somebody else looks a little bit better because she's probably gonna be moving on in a year or two.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
And that's,
really, really hard.
yeah.
So
And that's a shame. And um, I, I don't recall specifically. I think it was in North Carolina. I could be wrong, but Elizabeth Hartman, who I'm connected with, she was a Marine, and then she got out and went to school. Has a couple degrees now. She's a financial planner, and she's also the uh, commander of their local American Legion. Is in New Bern, North Carolina, and she was sharing information where I think they had just passed legislation in that state. And again, I could be wrong, where essentially, uh, if you move to your next job, your 401k and all that stuff will go with you to that next local or wherever it is. They're just trying to make it easier for spouses in the military, and because you see it firsthand, you're being discriminated against because you're associated with the military, which means that you are going to be moving most likely at some period of time. So these companies don't want to invest time and effort into someone that they're going to be losing. Even if you're the best thing since sliced bread, I mean, I think that is so short-sighted, right? Because you can gain and learn and educate other people from the folks that you hire too, right? So there's benefit to hiring military spouses for what they bring, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. I'm kind of bleeding into your conversation here, but I just wanted to affirm and say forthrightly that you're right. Military spouses are absolutely discriminated against in the workforce, and it's wrong. And I think things are getting better, because there are other organizations out there that are seeing this and that they're becoming more active in the HR process with educating people, on what they're bypassing and the need to support your community in terms of helping folks get employed, people that are associated with the military as spouses. So, but yeah,
mhm.
it's a shame that, that you go through things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so hard to get plugged into your community whenever you can't get a job in your community. I mean, I was able to get a job, but it was nothing meaningful to me, and it was like soul sucking working at a low end jewelry store. That was the first job
Right.
I got, and then I was really lucky to work at an insurance agency where eventually they let me go remote whenever we PCS to Fort Benning. And that
Oh,
was pretty wild. Like we PCS there in 2017. So they, within a week, figured out how to let me go remote because I was valuable to them. And it was just easier to hold a valuable employee that does good work and that you know and trust than hire somebody else. And I wish more companies could kind of see that it really is not that difficult. I mean, my bosses at the insurance agency are very good at thinking ahead and willing to take a risk and be innovative like that. But they're able to do it, and thank goodness they were able to do it because then COVID happened and they had to go remote. All their employees did have to do that. So it's taught us, I mean, COVID has taught us a lot, like as far as even small businesses being able to support military spouses in remote positions. Um, you really can have a lot of flexibility now. I
right.
just wish that more people would kind of take the leap and do that. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking as you were talking about, the remoteness of this position prior to COVID, that's exactly where my mind went. I'm just like, holy smokes, things have changed so much, and companies figured out a way. Hey, how do we continue doing what we're doing? We got to modify things, obviously, with not being able to be together, but they're finding that, hey, folks can still be successful. We can still run a business and maybe save on overhead because we don't have folks coming into a space all the time, and we can change our business a bit to kind of catch up to where we are, and then thinking down the road, hey, if this works, why wouldn't we continue doing some form of this, or maybe a hybrid of that relationship with your employees and your customer base? But was that at, is it AT Matthews and Dyer? Is that the company you're referring to?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
family-owned insurance agency. There's only like 12 of us employees. So, I mean,
Wow.
yeah, it was
Well,
cool.
yeah. Well, good on them for being that willing to do that. But like you said, they saw something in you, obviously, to want to do that, right? And it is hard when you spend time getting educated and then you know have an expectation, and then your expectations change because of some identification that's on your forehead saying that you're a military spouse, and
Hmm.
and that, I'll just say that sucks. It's just wrong. I mean, discrimination in any form is wrong, but especially for folks who, and I'll just say this, when your husband or wife is an officer, as a junior officer, things can get tight, things can be tough. But when you think about the enlisted folks and how much they're getting, annually, for the first 4 years, it's not uncommon that those folks qualify for, federal assistance because they're not getting paid much, and so when their spouses need a job, they're being looked at with a jaundiced eye because of the things that we've talked about, and that's got to change, and it's getting better. And I have a feeling, when we're going to ask you about your why here in a bit, I already kind of have a feeling what that might be, and why your why is what it'll be. But yeah, we need folks that care and understand, and who better than somebody who has experienced this firsthand, that has a, you have some skin in the game, I guess, right? Because of your circumstance. So, and you're a good person, and good people generally want to, make things better. So that's always an important thing. So, well, okay. And so you talk about, you get married, your husband's in the Army. As I mentioned, he's an officer in the Army. Uh, how else has life changed for you, being a military spouse? Because again, most folks, they understand you're married to somebody in the military, but what comes along with that? What does that mean to you to be a military spouse? What things have impacted you? How has it changed you, as a person?
Gosh, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it totally shapes you, and you didn't expect that. Like people say, you signed up for this, but like I absolutely didn't. I'm not from a military family. I didn't know anything that this would entail. Um, it it's a wild, wild ride. So when I moved to Fort Drum, like my family are workers. I'm a farmer's daughter. You got up. My dad he got his foot caught in a combine accident when he was 5 years old, still went on to be a
Wow.
state champion wrestler, still hardest working man I've ever met. And he taught us all to be like that. And it drives our husband nuts. My sisters, all of our husbands,
Right.
because we're like, you need to do this now. I asked you to do it 5 seconds ago. Why aren't you doing it? Whatever, I'll just do it myself. Right. That's what we always like. But we're workers and we're doers. And so my self-worth has kind of always been tied into like being busy and doing stuff. Like all of my
Hmm.
sisters were 3 sport athletes. We're in academics. We're always, had a job in the summer. We're doing stuff all the time. So then whenever you kind of are taken and put somewhere unfamiliar, you've got to figure out, how I can do stuff there. And it's not healthy to tie your self-worth into your employment. But as a 23, 24-year-old, that's what I did. So, I was working as an insurance agent. I was selling makeup and supplements. I was working as a fitness instructor at the local gym and waitressing, all just
Holy
to stay
smokes.
busy and make myself feel like I was contributing something, because it like really I still had student loans. So
All right.
it killed me to have my husband, pay that stuff. Um, I just wanted to be done with it. I wasn't using my degree, but it was a good way for me to meet people in the community too. And the gym that I ended up attending really saved my mental health because of the owners. The owners and the trainers there were so it was like divine intervention. They guided me, they like wrapped their arms around me. They were just wonderful. But not everybody gets that lucky.
All right.
So it's really, really easy to isolate yourself. And that's totally what I did too. Like whenever we moved to Fort Benning, I was still working remote. I was pregnant with our first boy, and I didn't get out of the house. I didn't know anybody. You're in a remote position. Um, and it, it's one of those things where, like, when I worked at that jewelry store, I met the stereotypical military spouses that everyone makes fun of, as far as like demanding and rude and where's their husband's rank, literally had purses on with their husband's rank and
Yeah.
everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't be a part of this community. I can't do it. It's just too much for me. I don't relate because my
Right.
identity is not wrapped up in my husband's. Um, and I
And that's healthy.
really,
That's the way that's the way it should be, right? I mean, it's good to have an
yeah,
understanding of what your spouse does, but it shouldn't become who you are, right? Yeah,
yeah.
I saw that in my 21 years too. So
Yeah, I kind of
absolutely.
went in the opposite direction though, and kind of isolated myself more and refused to learn the language of the army, refused to, be affiliated with anything. Didn't Never wanted to go to base, never wanted to do anything like that, because I just didn't want to. Foolishly, I just didn't want to be associated with that limited group that I saw.
All right.
Um, but now I realize that's not that's not everybody. And yeah, so I really, really isolated myself. And I think a lot of people do that. It's very, very hard to, if you're not living on base, which we never did, it's really hard to meet people. So you feel very lonely.
Right.
And I think a lot of people feel really lonely. Like on the wives pages, people are always like, does anybody, want to hang out? Does anybody need a friend? And it's kind of like a really brave thing to do, to one, admit that, and to actually pull yourself out of whatever funk you're in and go meet these people. But it's
Right.
so important. I mean, we're social creatures. We are meant to have connection. And I think like at a base level, you need to remember that and try and take care of yourself, because like me as a mom right now, I mean, just this move, for example, my mom texted me yesterday and was like, so do you have a plan for, because I'm 7 months pregnant. She's like, do you have a plan for, what you're going to do when you go into labor? And I was like, no, I have no plan. My husband's probably going to have to drive me to the hospital and drop me off, and I have this baby and come home because we don't know anybody here.
Right.
So it's like all these really weird problems that other people don't normally have to solve. And it's really, really easy to feel jealous, especially of like your friends that have like stability in their life, like or have careers, because you're not really afforded that as a military spouse. So being able to really stand firm in who you are, and what you have to offer without that being tied to employment or whatever. Because you're right, like military spouses really do have to run the household and take care of so many things whenever their husband's gone. Like I
Right.
laughed the other day. I got so irritated with our lawn. We needed a weed whacker. And I've been weed whacking. Like I said, I'm a farmer's daughter. I've been weed whacking since I could hold a weed whacker. But I always wear makeup and I look fit. So people probably think I don't know and I don't care, but they probably think she doesn't know how to use a weed whacker.
Right.
Fair,
Yeah.
fair
Yeah.
point.
Like
I go
stand
into
by.
the store. Yeah, I go into the store and I told them exactly what I want. And they're like, how tall is he? And I was like, excuse me? Like, how tall is he that's going to be using it? And I was like, oh, you're looking at her. And I was like, about this tall, 5'4". And they're like, oh, okay. And then I'm like asking, all these questions, like what's kind of string do I need? Is it 50-50 mixture? Like, not questions that are way off base. Obviously you can tell that I've used a weed whacker before.
Right.
And then I go to check out. They're like, you're gonna do this? And I said, yeah. Like, how are you gonna do that? And I said, I'm just gonna weed whack. They're like, but what are you gonna do with your kids? And I was thinking, I should have told them I'm gonna make them push the lawnmower while I weed whack.
That's right.
Beside
Yeah.
my 3-year-old and 1 year,
My
like, what do
crew.
you? I'm gonna tell them to stand back from the weed whacker and they can go hit a baseball in the yard while I whack some weeds. Like, these are things you have to do as a spouse.
Right.
You have to maintain your household. You have to, I mean, some people don't, but anyway, it's just a lot of
Well, yeah.
underestimation, a lot of self-sufficiency, a lot of thinking for yourself.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And there's paying of bills. There's dealing with when things go wrong. The hot water heater breaks, or something happens with the car. And you're fortunate. You really are, that you have the background that you have, because that helps you to be more proficient, more able to take on these things because of how you were raised, and which is, I mean, that's a blessing for your husband. And just like you said, it. I was thinking, wow, this sounds familiar, because my wife, her her dad died in Vietnam, and her oldest sibling was almost 17, and her sister, was like around 2. Her mom never got remarried, and her mom was a go-getter. You don't tell. She's passed on now, God rest her soul, but you never told Marie no, or you never told her you can't do this, because she would be the first person to say, hold my beer, you know, and
Hmm.
but you know, and so my wife saw that in her mom, that her mom was kind of like a mom and dad combined, and so my wife's a doer, she's the same thing, she, quite frankly, she wears me out, because she is always, what's the next thing? I'm like, well, next thing is just taking a break for a second. Well, no, don't you understand? We have this, this, this. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And so we're always struggling for, that balance there. And, we've been married for 35 years now. And so, but I know that's how she is. And so where I'm going with this is when I was in the Marine Corps, I never worried about what was happening at the house. Of course, I missed and, was concerned for everyone's well being, but I never worried about, are the kids going to be cared for? If something happens, is she going to be able to take care of it? Because I knew she could, absolutely. She's a smart gal. She's an engineer by trade. So, like you said, when you go to the store and, you have some guy that, he doesn't know, he starts generalizing. And then, I just watch my wife's face when people are telling her stuff and it's not right, and she's very nice and polite. She doesn't say, look, knucklehead, she just, okay, well, thanks, and then and she looks at me and she's like, everything you said was just not right. And I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
I get it, but so anyhow, yeah, I see those things. And uh, having that background absolutely helps as a spouse, because you're not having to rely on too many people, right? You can do certain things, and then of course you learn too, right? You grow into the role. And a point that I want to go back on, Michelle, is when you were talking about, at some point you took a 180 and we're kind of going away from things that now you realize you should have been moving towards, or maybe been a little more open to, in terms of how to navigate that side of your husband's career, because it's beneficial, to him and to you. Things have changed. It used to be that there was this long list of things that military spouses, and when I say that, that means generally, the wife, you got to do this. There were things you had to go to, events you had to entertain. A lot of that has changed, and I think for the better, right? Because some of it was really old school, but in today's terms, expectations wise, it's just kind of off the charts in terms of what used to happen. But so again, where I'm going with that is uh, when you're at, and it's probably just depends on where you are, what groups of people are there, the people that are the spouses that are getting together, and the groups that they have, like when you deploy, there's a group that the command has that, that the spouses kind of run. They work with the command, right, to provide information to all the other spouses and to be a connection point, for lack of a better word. But if you get the wrong people in those organizations, the ones you were talking about that are wearing their husband's rank on their, on their collar, literally and figuratively, it makes it harder, because things become like a click, and then yeah, it makes you not want to be part of that organization. And it's, we never lived on base either. I mean, I lived on base occasionally because I was, a geo bachelor, when I had to leave the family and, take on a job for a year or so. But the family was never on base. So my wife went through that too. She didn't have that association with all the other wives on base. She didn't have folks to go, grab a coffee with or go do things with, but she was always busy like you. And so that's how, she filled her days with projects and, planning and doing. And we lived in decent neighborhoods. So, at some point, she met up with folks in the neighborhood, and, we were blessed and we had good friends. And so we were thankful for that, and it all worked out. But in the end, being married to somebody in the military is hard. It's very difficult, because a lot of things, like you said, are new. And, if you've never interfaced with that, it's a lot, and it could be overwhelming quickly. And a lot of marriages struggle, you know, and a lot of marriages in the military don't work out. And it's a shame, because, especially for these, and I get back to the younger junior enlisted, money isn't everything, but money helps. And if you're struggling and, you're not far out of high school and you're married, and then you have a kid, and that whole having a kid, if you don't really know your spouse well, and now you're having a kid, that's a different dynamic. There's all these different stresses. It's hard enough when you're not in the military, but when you add that dynamic, the things that you talked about, the things we've just been chatting about, it makes things so much harder. And so you need a special person, I think, to be a military spouse, someone who can grow into the role and understand the challenges and wind up, solving these problems and being independent. And I know I'm kind of a bit long-winded here, but I do want to make this point because I think this point's important for the spouses, whether it's the husband or the wife who's in the military, you know, hey, when you're not around, absolutely your spouse is, you know, rightfully going to be in charge and make decisions. And guess what? Sometimes you're not going to be part of that decision process, and that's the way it rolls. And you got to learn to be okay with it. And especially when you're deployed, when you come back, you can't come back and start getting into the what's this, what's that, why did you do this? How, that is destructive. I learned that through, I'm a knuckle dragging guy, right? Sometimes you don't see things when they're staring in the face. And then when your wife tells you, well, okay, well, how am I supposed to do this, that, and the other one? I can't even get a hold of you. Why would I not? And it's like, okay, yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. Hey, I'm really sorry. Yeah, I get it. And everything can't be an issue like that. You just have to learn to, you know, co-share as, adults and as parents and, you know, look to honor each other in those ways and to be thankful that you have a spouse that can do the things that you're doing. And, and we all grow, right? And so that's something that I share with, young, I did it, in service too, about trying to give advice to young couples about things that they kind of need to understand and then how to get past these tough times. When you look at forgiveness and, patience, I mean, those two things are so important. But anyhow, I get very
Absolutely.
passionate about this. I don't
I
mean to,
I
be weighing into your time here.
I get it. That's actually one of the things that I started off with is um, on my personal Instagram, I changed it to more of a business page to help spouses understand all these resources that were on base for them. Because my husband and I came from a loving family, but my parents, my dad again is a farmer. He has a very different way of showing love and affection. It's different than what
Right.
I wanted to see in my marriage. Um, Chris, my husband, came from a family where he didn't have anything to emulate as far as a marriage. So we were both, um, I don't know, willing to ask for help, I guess. So we have sat down with our chaplain, when things aren't going right. Is it like, oh my
Michelle,
gosh, are we doomed?
that is, I'm interrupting you. That is absolutely key. That is so important to realize, hey, we need to talk to somebody, and then both spouses be willing to do that because the folks that don't do that are often the ones that don't make it. Yeah,
Yeah, you
absolutely.
really have to um, kind of just humble yourself. I say this a lot, and when my husband was going through his mental health issues, the biggest takeaway that I had from that was even though he was in a depression and his mental state was greatly affecting our marriage, the only thing that I could change was myself. And as somebody that is very, very stubborn and loves to be right, um, that was so like humbling. And it was really just the most vulnerable I've ever been. And so whenever I had to take myself and think like the only way that I'm going to save my marriage right now is by changing myself and how I'm reacting to this situation. And just by doing that, totally changed our relationship and helped get him to a place where he needed to be healthy so that way we could work on a relationship together. So I'm a very big believer in number one, being on the same team financially, because you can't, finances will ruin you as a person and as
Absolutely.
uh, your marriage. And, being willing to check in with yourself because as a military family, we go through way more changes than the average couple. And you cannot talk to your high school friends or your college friends about their marriage because they've been living in the same house with their husband or wife for the last 10 years or whatever.
Right.
Just going through a move, going through a deployment, like that's a really, really big thing. And you're going to constantly evolve. And how do you hang on? And how do you continuously like each other through that?
Mm.
Because you have to love each other. You have to choose to love each other. That was another big takeaway that one of the sermons that I watched one time, it was like they're talking to me. It's like, how do you honor your spouse? You have to wake up every day, whether you can stand them or not, and choose to love them and choose to show them somehow that you love them. And if you're doing that, usually the other person follows their lead, but you have to work on your marriage. And as a military family, you have to work so much harder, I feel.
Yes. Yeah. Those are words of wisdom and words to live by, as someone married and, and even just relationally, right? With other people too. You can have a dispute with your best buddy, and those things happen, but you can go home. You
Mhm.
can't not be with your spouse unless, you decide we're done, which is, that's not why you get married in the first place. Especially, once you have kids, there's even more of an incentive to make things work. And everything you said, I think is so important. And you mentioned divine intervention. I think there's some of that happens too when it, helps in saving your marriage. And you probably have read this book. If not, I would recommend it to you. It's the Five Love Languages. Have you heard about that?
Our
And
chaplain, yeah, that's what we had to go through with our
yeah,
chaplain at Fort Drum. Yeah.
hey, I recommend that to anybody. And some folks aren't religious, but hey, take that out of it. Listen to what they're saying about, just like you said, your father was raised differently. He showed love a certain way. That's not the way that you necessarily show or want to receive love, right? There's different these five categories that people fall into, generally speaking. And like my wife, she sounds like you in ways, right? And her upcoming or upbringing, and she's a doer. And so that being the case, if I bring her flowers or something, okay, they're pretty, but it kind of ends right there, and she's like, well, they're nice, but you spent X amount of dollars on them and they're going to die in like 2 days and they're going to smell bad. Then I have to throw them away. I'd much rather you get that weed whacker that Michelle was talking about and go over there and hit the flower bed. That would show me that you
Yeah.
really love me, and it's like, when you're not used to that, it's like, what do you mean I don't, because you don't understand that there is this dynamic and you need to, as you say, figure that out, honor that. And then if you really love that person, then why would you not want to do these things that let them understand and feel that they're loved? Because you just can't say, well, of course I love you. That only goes so far. That's a verbal thing. You can say anything, but it's your actions. How do you finally
Hmm.
get to that point to where you're honoring your spouse through your actions? And boy, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, the better you feel. And then you see the reaction of them. And then, they're wanting to kind of do the same for you. And hopefully it kind of, that comes around and things get better. But I think what you're saying is so right. And I think that book that's icing on the cake to, what you just said. So yeah, and again, when you put the whole issue of being a military spouse, it just makes marriage harder. So once you figure that out, then guess what? You become, hey, look at what this couple is doing. Why, man, you guys are things are good. Hey, what are you doing? What's different with you guys? And then you can share, right? And which hopefully is, part of, what you're doing now with your experiences that you're sharing with these folks that really need, kind of like a big sister or, a mentor or somebody that kind of gets, hey, yeah, I struggle with it too. But I've learned some things, and this is what I know now. And these are some things that can help you. And it's not just with resource, but it's like talking about these relationship issues that come up, and having someone to talk with. Like you said, when you're isolated, things become that much more intense, even though they
Hmm.
might not be. but because you're isolated, it makes things harder, right?
Yeah,
And
your
so
problems are
having,
amplified.
yes, no, absolutely. And so having those folks to talk to, and again, going back to what you said, if you're talking to a friend that you grew up with that has no understanding of, what you're going through, not that they can't, want to be there for you, but if you're talking to other folks that are going through this at the same time, so you have that shared experience, or someone who has, kind of done this for a while and they have goodness to share, man, that makes so much of a difference. So I would always say, hey, you guys have to reach for each other. You guys have to, look to spend time together, these other spouses to help each other, because we
Hmm.
leave. And so if we're gone, you guys are a force multiplier, because you can maybe rely on some of your friends when something comes up. If you need someone to watch the kids, or maybe they need you to help them, if you know each other, you've got that immediate connection there, and that can make things easier too. But
Yeah.
when you're not living on base, then again you have that other disconnector, and then so you got to figure out, well, how do I bridge that gap? So yeah, there's just so much. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot
So
of dynamics, and then figuring out whenever you can't handle anymore and what you can take off your plate, because it's not good if the person running the show right now is overwhelmed, and that causes more problems. So that's something that I really had to learn, is figure out really what I need to lose control over, and what doesn't need done right now, or what I can give to somebody else to do.
wow, this is like a clinic. I mean, it really is, because I am so connected with what you're saying, and that's true, right? It's like the serenity prayer. It's like, what are the things that I need to understand that I can't affect, and how can I let those things go so that I can, do and be better in my life, not just for me, but for others. And how can I tell what those things are so I can just walk past those things and focus on the things that are important? You know, I here recently I've been saying, of course we connected because of LinkedIn, and I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and I think I think if used correctly, it's a fantastic platform, and we're seeing so many. At least I've seen a lot uh, in my group of folks that I usually chat with, folks talking about, having their pack on their back, and that it gets heavy, and you need to sometimes take a look at the inventory of, what are you carrying on your back, and can I get rid of this? Because a buddy of mine, Bernie, he was in the Army of Special Forces. He posted today about your rucksack, that it gets heavy, and that you need to take a break, open it up, and hey, that thing expired a long time ago. Why is it still in your rucksack? You need to get rid of that, and figuring out that, because man, when you relieve that burden off your back, life becomes different, because you can breathe, right? You're not exercising and expending energy on this extra weight back there. Why is that back there? It doesn't need to be, right? And figuring those things out can be really hard. There's soul searching that goes into that. There's maybe forgiveness that's tied to letting go of something. And
Hmm.
sometimes forgiveness is hard earned depending on what happened, and are you ready to forgive? I mean, that's a whole nother, very in-depth topic, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're so right, in learning to kind of get to that, because it betters you, and then it betters your relationship with others, especially your spouse.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, I just, as I told you, these things always just click by. We're already at, 50 minutes here. And so what I would like to do now is talk about, let's talk about what you're doing now in terms of Veteran Help Point. And so what was the genesis of this? I would imagine it's tied to your experiences as a mill spouse, probably most smartly so. But why did you get into this, and what's your why behind what you're doing with that organization? And if you want to explain maybe up front in more detail what it's all about, and then answer that question, that's fine. However you want to take that.
Yes. Well, so my husband left. active duty Army in 2019. And he was down at Fort Benning. He was going through MCCC. And by the end of it, it was just like the writing was on the wall. His career is not going to progress where he wants it to as an infantryman. So he had to make the decision, move us out to Fort Irwin, California, across the country, where I would not see him for most of the 3 years that he would be out there, or and then it would do nothing to further his career. So it would be, just not a headache,
It's a big
or
ask. Yeah.
yeah, or just get out, figure out what to do on the civilian side. So he chose to get out, figure out the civilian side, and it happened so quickly. It was about 2 or 3 months time where he figured out he needed to do all this stuff. Whereas most people get, a year or a year and a half, and they can start thinking about what they want to do. So he went through SFL TAP, he was interviewing, and he did get a job back home in Pennsylvania. So we moved the family back to Pennsylvania. It was not a job that he was happy about. It's not something that he ever saw himself doing. It was not fulfilling, meaningless work is what it was. But we thought it'll be all right. We're going to be the closest to family we've ever been in our marriage. So it's not going to be that bad. We literally lived in the same town as his sister-in-law. So it was great. But he got out of Army and went Army Reserve at that point. So he was just a weekend guy once a month, 2 weeks in the summer. But because he had none of his friends, like we just left a great community at Fort Benning. He had none of his friends up here, no one he could relate to. He just totally stripped himself of his identity. And he just went into a depression. Like we could not talk to each other. It got to the point where I was, we were either divorce or death. Like there was something that was going to happen there, but I didn't think the marriage was going to end well, because we just were total strangers at this point. His mental health had really declined. He just really lost his sense of self-worth and being, with this decision. So, he tried to go to the VA for some help. They denied him care. And
Wow.
yeah, so then I had to take on the role of finding him help in the area. It was really, really tough because I couldn't find somebody that could relate to his situation. We were not in a military town anymore. So finding him somebody that could relate to his experiences, his past, his identity as a soldier that had now just been stripped, because that's really what was happening. Like he was grieving this loss.
Yes.
So the help that he found was not helpful at all. And it was through his veteran friends that kind of got him connected and plugged in where he needed to be. And it was so frustrating to me because, I'm not, it's not like I've never researched anything before. It's not like I've ever, it's not my first time using Google. It's not my first time
Right.
calling, for help. Or being, out of my element, figuring out what to do, but I still could not find these resources for him. And we were in a town outside of Philadelphia. It was a pretty big, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was a pretty big town, city. And I still couldn't find it. So like the fact that he found help through word of mouth was almost infuriating to me, because it should have been so much easier. And then at the same time, we're going through all of this, our neighbor, who was a Vietnam veteran, we lived in a duplex at the time, and the whole house at one time he owned, he had to sell half of the house because he could not pay those taxes anymore. So my landlord bought it, flipped it. So we were living side by side. He and his partner were not married. They could not pay the taxes on the house anymore. So I think in Pennsylvania, it's like 5 years back taxes or something like that. So he had 5 years back taxes owed on his property. The government kicked him out of his house. He had grown children that did not live in Pennsylvania, did not know what to do. didn't even know the first place to call or where to put him. So he was about to be homeless. And luckily, we live beside him and we're friendly people and like to help our neighbors. So we're like, hey, how you doing? We noticed some things aren't quite right. Are you okay? And they told us the situation and we're like, oh my gosh, we got to do something. So we were able to get him into a house with this lady that runs a mansion for Vietnam veterans,
Oh,
essentially,
wow.
because her husband was a Vietnam veteran, and so that's how she likes to give back. Um, that was not a searchable thing on the internet. His wife, she wasn't his wife. They've been partners for, I think, 40 years at that point, over 40 years. And so, in the eyes of the military, that did not matter.
Right.
So we were able to find her some local resources and just have them in a safe, clean place until they're able to figure out a better solution that landed them together. So at this time, just like, whoa, it should not be this difficult to find resources for veterans. It really should be a simple search and click. Um, and then my husband deployed and I moved back in with my family. And so I had a lot of time to think about this and stew on it.
Did he, Michelle, did he go back into the Army? You said that he deployed.
Yeah,
Oh,
so he's
yeah.
Army Reserve. And
Okay.
then
Yeah.
he went, so now we're down here at Bragg, he's full-time Army Reserve.
Right.
So um, he, yeah, he decided civilian life wasn't for him.
Yeah.
So
You
we're
know,
back in the game now.
yeah, going back to something you mentioned that I think it's very common and it's something that catches folks off guard, and that's that stripping of identity. I mean, they know that okay, I'm leaving the military, so things will be different, but they underestimate the impact of that feeling of losing that identity, and with that identity, your sense of purpose is often wrapped in to that identity because it becomes who you are as a person, as your persona. And when that's gone, you've got this empty space. And especially when you leave quickly, it it antagonizes that because your plan is probably not a good plan because it's a quick plan. When you plan, planning implies that there's time involved, right? And that it's a thoughtful thing. And my leaving the military was faster, than I wanted it to be. I thought I would be around 5 more years, and without going into details, I made a decision to retire. And so then that that accelerated the process. And so if I would have, decided down the road, I would have absolutely sat down and so losing that identity, it's a real thing. And you see people talking about it, and folks are thankfully becoming more willing to be wanting and vulnerable to discuss these things because especially with guys, right? The guys in the military, there's an alpha male thing. It's not with everybody, but in the infantry, it's there. It's absolutely there. And you're not really, it's not necessarily seen as a positive thing to share your feelings and your emotions. And, it's like, what the heck's that? Get out of my face. That's wet stuff. I don't, come on, we're mission focused. That's detracting. But you have to know yourself and you have to be able to, talk about these things. And so if you go from that environment to all that's going on, what's this new thing and these challenges that come up? And, if you're struggling with not finding a job, if you're having a relationship issue, you're having a kid, all it just becomes this volatile cocktail that can, drown you. And again, it's a blessing for both you guys that you were in the mindset of understanding what you were seeing and being proactive and doing the things that you do. And God bless you for connecting with your neighbor like that. I mean, sometimes it's hard. You see things and then you realize, okay, I guess I'm the person that has to get involved because that person needs help. And not everyone does that. A lot of folks tend to, that's just too messy. I can't do that. And, thank you for for doing that. That says a lot about, who you and your husband, I'm sure he was probably part of that too, but it's a blessing because our Vietnam veterans had a hard time. They just didn't
Yeah.
have the experience that I had and that my grandfather who served in the Second World War had. Life was very different for those folks. And so, yeah, again, that's another story, but okay. So, getting back to what you're saying, Michelle. So your husband deployed, and I'll get right back to what you were saying there.
Yeah. So that's when I started to jump into kind of the resource space on the spouse end of things, because my husband has been on the administrative side of a lot of things. So he knows about a lot of the resources on base. And so we
Right.
were able to utilize a lot of those. And I just thought it was something that everybody knew. And then I quickly learned that not everybody knows. Like, people didn't know that you could just go onto, I mean, if you're active duty, you can just go on the base and sit down with a financial counselor. You can have them literally pull up your TSP information and allocate what you need allocated. They can take it out of your paycheck right there. You can see how much you're going to retire with. Like, these are very, very important things that are very, very free for you to use and set yourself up, for success. So why are we not doing that? And there's a lot of resources out there that I saw that were not being taken advantage of. And it's a real shame, because you should be able to leave the military on two very solid feet. You have the
Agreed.
resources
Yeah.
to be able to do that. But it's not the case, because it's just the government. The government does not advertise itself. Well, it doesn't need to. It's the government. So I started to get into that space. And then, I was talking to some other spouses and veterans that just recently left, and they're like, I'm seeing where people are not connecting with resources out there like we were. So it's not like, oh, Michelle's dumb, she didn't know how to search for these resources. It is so common. It is really, really, how are other people finding resources or not finding resources that are not, the national names, and you don't
Right.
have to call 1-800 number, because if you need help, you want it right then. And there are some 1-800 numbers that are good at that. And then there are some, like, for instance, I just called a 1-800 number to help a veteran across the country. And do you know what this number said? It wants you to press 1, 2, or 3 for different ways to donate to them first before they are able to give you help. And I was just like, click,
Ouch.
not for
Yeah.
me. This is not helpful. So that's the kind of stuff that really, really ticks me off. If I was looking for help, I don't make me go through those prompts and tell you that I do not want to donate. I need help right now.
Right. Yeah. You are so right. And the organization may be an organization that does good work, but they're just not thinking, process wise, how people's minds process where they are. And yeah, that
Yeah,
becomes, for some people, that's a big red flag. It's like, okay, these folks are focused on maybe making money, when what they're really meaning to say is, we need money to continue the good work we're doing. And there's a different way
hmm
to present that, right? You're
absolutely.
right. When you need help, you
And
need help.
yeah, and I'm like one of the people, and you're in the nonprofit space, but you still need money to operate. So like, money and profit should not be a dirty word in the nonprofit
Right.
space just because you're nonprofit. But the fact is, if you're calling somebody or you're on somebody's website, you really have to keep that end user in mind. Like, who's going to be using this? What type of mental state are they going to be in? And how can we make it as easy as possible to reach those people and feel like they're heard and cared about before they even have to speak up? Because that's
Right.
sort of what we want. It's so hard to be incredibly self-sufficient, maybe your entire military career, maybe you're just in for 6 years or whatever, and then say, I need help, whether it's help with mental health, or finding a doctor, or just, finding a job. You typically want to do it yourself and be able to feel like you did it yourself. So keeping that end user in mind is very, very important for us as a business, because we have resources that tailor to people that are about to lose their home or that are actively homeless, or even if you're just moving across the country and you need to find a realtor. So we have everybody in between, and then you have people that have TBIs or PTSD that aren't able to read forms that well, that aren't able to read the resources that well. So how are you going to cater to them? There are so many people, and one of the big groups that I was thinking about that I hope we'll be able to use this are Vietnam veterans and their caregivers. So how can I make this as easy for them to use without having to click a bunch of links, read through a bunch of things? How can they get the help they need without feeling frustrated?
Right. Yeah, and that's a big deal. I think you were so smart for approaching that way. There needs to be intuitive, and also needs to not put up roadblocks or be distracting to where it's kind of like you're looking at it and it's like, wow, what do I where do I go? I mean, this is confusing, and then that becomes maybe not useless, but then that becomes another thing to have to deal with, and then you want to talk to somebody. Hey, I don't get this. I need help
Mhm.
because your system here, I can't figure it out. And I like to talk to people. I mean, generally speaking, when something comes up, whether it's an issue with, something, like a bill, something's not charged, whatever. I don't like to go onto the website. I want to talk to somebody because I want to have that interaction, and I want to understand, what the issue is, and have them explain to me, what it is. And it is frustrating when you're just doing normal business. I get frustrated. I can imagine being in the state of mind where I need help and I'm running into these things, because that would just make you want to, that would send you off in the opposite direction of where you need to go.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly what I felt whenever I was, looking for help. And then I'm in this space now. So, people would say, well, have you heard of this resource? Because the government has a resource like this. It's called the National Resource Database. And I have no problem saying it's an absolute disaster of a site. And I firmly believe that the private sector can always do things uh, better than the government sector, because we just have more availability and opportunity to be innovative.
Right.
Um, and
It's a good
so
word.
that, yeah, we can constantly evolve. The government's always 10 years behind. um, and my husband laughs all the time because he's like, people say, oh, I got this military grade stuff, and he's like, the private sector has so much better. They just have no idea.
Yeah.
And it's the truth. We're about 10 years behind, with just processes and bureaucracy. That's what ties it up. So, um, yeah, it's not like I'm trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to make the car be a little bit smoother for you.
Right.
And I just, when I was in that state of mind, I was panicked and not able to get my husband help. And gosh, it just makes you feel so helpless and so worthless and so um, really just doom and gloom. Like there's no way out of this.
Right.
And I want to be able to create a community of resources where people can come and utilize that and improve their mental health and their relationships with their families, because I took one thing off their plate for them.
Right. Amen. That's a powerful statement. And it's good to know that someone like you, again, through your experiences, you have a level of empathy to, that comes with your life experience. And so you see the goodness in connecting these dots, for folks. And so, let's say I had, whatever my issue might be, how do I navigate the process? What would I have to do to want to, start using what you've put together?
So our website is in the very basic state right now, because I
Mhm.
kind of put it on pause to fundraise.
Right.
So right now I have, we're working on the Southeast region, and we're doing it region by region. So that way we get regions up and they work really well. Before we move on to another region, we can find the bugs, work them out,
Right.
smooth sailing. So we have it set up that you can go click by your state, and then whenever you click on your state, you'll be able to see the list of resources from there, and they're in alphabetical order. From there, you can click on the different category that you need if you want to break it up by categories. And we have 10
Okay.
different categories right now that we're featuring. So it's primary care, mental health, physical therapy, holistic therapy, financial aid and literacy, job assistance, housing assistance, um, benefits, fitness, and legal. So
Well, you knew all that just rolled off. That's a good sign. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're trying to think of, people are very complex, and if
Right.
one tower kind of falls, it causes a ripple effect in your life. So we're trying to make sure that whatever you may need right then, we can kind of hold you together with that resource to prevent another tower from tumbling. And eventually we want to move to spouse specific resources, caregiver specific resources, and children specific resources.
Nice.
So right now we're focusing on veterans and their families, and that's how we have it organized. And then we'll be adding a geolocation search feature, because whenever we are at Fort Benning, you're on the border of Georgia and Alabama. So I don't want you to exclude resources because you clicked on Georgia because that's where you live, but there could be a really good resource right over the border in Alabama that's 15 miles away.
Right.
So I want you to be able to find whatever radius you're comfortable driving. And then, of course, we have a virtual tab now because a lot of people are doing things online. Like I have a great military therapist who just specializes in military couples. That's all she does. And she will work with you whether you're in Japan or whether you're in Alaska. So we have a lot of really cool resources that we're able to go virtual and people can utilize that way too.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, you've really thought this through, right? You know, Obviously you're a smart person, but again, your lived experience, these things, right? So these are the issues that we need to address where folks will need help. And the holistic approach, I think, is so important because you're right. It's not just one thing. There's multiple
Mhm.
things that make us who we are that help us in living our lives fully and understanding what those things are, how they connect. How do you go about getting the services that you need? And as folks who've served, a lot of they rate a lot of things that they don't necessarily understand either, because sometimes transition isn't the best. You can transition very well from one location and maybe not so well from the next location because the program isn't quite the same, and the people, we're all people, right? We make up the organizations, and some folks are better at what they do than others, right?
Sure.
So yeah, well, as far as where you are now in the state of developing, this beast that you're putting together, with a website, um, are you looking for folks to help with that? Are you looking for folks to volunteer time? How is that coming along?
Yeah, I definitely would love to have volunteers. It's been hard to sustain volunteers this where you are in a business. I mean, it's hard to get people to buy into you whenever you're new because really that's what
Mhm.
they need to do. So volunteers would make this go so much faster. And one of my end goals is to be able to hire military spouses for remote positions, to give them meaningful work that I wish that I had.
Right.
So that is one of my end goals, whether that's a part-time position or a full-time position. I also am looking into internships because high school kids that are looking for a really good internship to list on their college application, this would be great for them. If you're in
Yes.
college, this would be great for you. Um, so I'm looking at at reaching out to some local colleges here and see if I can partner with them and kind of swap, internships for credits that they could receive, because it's
Wow, that's
not,
smart.
yeah, it's not, like I said, we're not reinventing the wheel. This is not difficult work, but it's a lot of
Right.
work.
Yeah,
And I think that's why
absolutely.
nobody's really done it.
The other thing too, Michelle, is, as you develop, what you're doing and, continue to have successes, provable successes. And of course, that you've got to keep your statistics. So, when you are going to uh, talk to folks about, investing, money into what you're doing, you can show them the books. Hey, this is my success. These are my metrics. This is what I'm achieving. Then the whole bang for the buck becomes, something it makes them think, hey, this is good. These folks, they know what they're doing and they're successful and they're showing us what that looks like. That's so important. And so where I'm going with that is that, maybe over time too, and maybe you've thought about this, but uh, connecting back to the military, whether it's the VA or whether it's the transition programs, to have them want to associate with you and the work you're doing. And that becomes, something that's a paid thing too, right? There are folks that are helping veterans, and they've got programs to where, they've connected with the VA. There's a process, and then at some point, the VA takes you through this process. They come in and give you their stamp, and then they work with you, and sometimes they fund you as well, to do the work that's being done. So I know uh, a good connection of mine, Dr. Teresa Larson. She has navigated that process for her business. What she's doing, she helps adaptive athletes, regain youth and, mind, body, soul thing. And so she's just an incredible person. She is giving back and wants to help, much like what you were doing. So in fact, she might even be, are you connected with her by chance? Does that sound
I
familiar?
feel like I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I've seen her.
Yeah. She was a Marine officer. She got out, as a junior officer. And she's got a great story, which I won't share with you now, but I think she would be a great, if you want, I can connect you with her. She would love to be connected with you. I can just see that right now. She's a mom of two boys, so, you've got the uh, young siblings thing in common too. But she might be willing to share with you what that looks like, and because
Yeah.
she's all about helping. She thinks she can help, especially if it's related to things with veterans. She'll knock the door down to help you. So, and then another person, Albert Bellamy, he's, all these Marines, but he was a Marine too. He's retired now, and he's a data guy, and he's very, he's big on LinkedIn. He's really done well with that. So not only is he a smart guy, but he knows folks. So maybe connecting with him could be some resources for some of the technical stuff you're looking on building, your
Yeah.
website and all of the searchable stuff you're looking to tie together. So I will look to connect you with them too, and I'm sure they would be more than happy to want to, listen. And if they can't do it, then they may know someone who can. How that works. That's
Sure. Yeah.
LinkedIn, right?
Mhm.
Part of LinkedIn. Well, that's great. So you already answered a question I was going to ask is where do you see this going over the coming years, and you kind of explained that. Is there anything else you want to add to that in terms of your expectation and goals and growth? Anything outside of what you've already said?
Um, I mean, yeah, we have a lot of long-term goals to make this sustainable, because you have to, I mean, you really have to think on the back end is how you're going to sustain yourself with profits instead of, constantly fundraising and things like that. And one of the things that we've realized, and when you're in this space, it really feels like a lot of things are oversaturated. But whenever you take a step out of it, um, I mean, there's definitely room for everybody. And one thing that my board member has brought up is he's a civilian. He's not associated with military at all, but he works for a company that has a DoD contract. And he sees, from his perspective, that there are a lot of companies that would like to help veterans, and they just do not know how, other
Right.
than to give money to these veteran organizations. But what's a better way we could help veterans? Well, we could help these organizations that don't know how to help veterans hire veterans and train them for those positions that
Amen.
they need. So doing something like that, contracting with some of these groups, and you know, uh, more technology down the line, we want to develop an app and things like that, just to put this in people's hands and make it as easy as possible. Because I mean, I I would so much rather use an app than go on a website. I'm never on my laptop,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I'm with you.
unless I'm doing this
Absolutely.
stuff. But yeah, so it's like we always have our phone. We always have a phone or tablet there, and developing things like that to just really make it easier. We're going to partner with a group that is, you're going to be able to call them, and they'll be able to access our database and help you figure out the top 5 resources that you should reach out to, things like that. So we have
Yeah.
a lot of plans and a lot of goals to start ticking off. But we've got to lay the groundwork. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've realized. And that's probably the hardest thing that I've had to do so far is um, not necessarily dial back my ambition, but definitely dial back my goals and realize that you cannot build a house on sand. You've got to have a firm foundation, and we've really, really got to lay the groundwork for this, if we want it to be sustainable and grow. So even if that means crawling before we can walk or run, that's what we've got to do, and that's kind of where we're at right now, because this does not work if it's not helpful for people.
Right. Yeah, Michelle, you're saying all the right things, and that's such a good sign. Again, I spent some time in the nonprofit arena, veteran facing, and I mean, you were right on every count in what you just said. And the timing is important with this too. There's a process. There's some things have to come before others, and determining what those are sometimes can be a little tricky. But it's also good. You mentioned board members. It's also good to have other folks who are part of the build, and part of developing the architecture that becomes what you do, because hey, you only have so much experience, you only have so much bandwidth as an individual. So bringing on board the right folks that are aligned to your establishment, your where you're going, your
Hmm.
mission, those are so important, and getting those folks in and making sure that everyone understands where we're going. And you can have differences of how you might want to get there, but in the end, as long as those folks are aligned and helping you build that your organization, those things are so important. And it really sounds like you've put so much thought and effort and smart thinking into what you're doing, and where you're going, how you're doing it. I think anyone who is interested in supporting you would love to understand it and hear that, because that goes a long ways. It really does. It shows that you're probably ahead of some of the folks at this stage in building what they do as a nonprofit. So that's a great sign.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, let's do this. We're at an hour and 24 minutes. Uh, how can folks get a hold of you? If you want to put that information out there, that's obviously your call. But how would someone do that? Or if you just want to, as we talked about, put it on when I post this to you, well, when Sarah posted this to YouTube, if you just want to leave that for us to put that in the description, that's fine. But if you want to share that with somebody now,
Yeah.
on here, you can certainly do that now if you'd like.
We've made it pretty easy. So our website is veteranhelppoint.com. And then you can click contact us and fill out a contact form. If you want to be listed as a resource, there's a contact form for that. If you'd like to volunteer, there's a contact form for that. If you just have questions, you can use that contact form. Um, Instagram, Facebook, we're Veteran Help Point. and we have Twitter, Vet Help Point, but I'm so not active on Twitter. You just kind of have to
Mhm.
like sometimes take up digital space. But
Right.
Facebook and Instagram, that's where the easiest place to reach me, and then a contact form because that goes right to my email. So we're
Okay.
we're pretty accessible.
That's good. Yeah, the whole ease of access thing is so important. And having, as you said, we all have that device now. It goes everywhere with us. And probably most folks, that's the first place they go when they want access. And so, kind of getting back to your point about wanting to have an app, that's just so smart. So that's good information. Well, let's do this. Since we're getting long in the hour here, on our second hour. Let me see here. We have Paul Curtis, and Daniel Torres that are still with us. Usually at this point, Sarah comes in. Sarah had another engagement today, so she's not here. And she did, here I'm messing up. I was supposed to say this in the beginning. She did say to thank you for being on here and to give you her best, that she wishes that she was here. But this is where Sarah comes in. Sarah always comes in. Sarah takes notes. She's got great questions. She's very affirming. She'll tell you what she liked about what you had to say. And she's fantastic. So anyhow, she would be handling this. So I'm going to be clumsy getting through this. So hey, with the two gentlemen that we have with us now, do either of you guys have any questions or comments for Michelle before we wrap this thing up today?
Sure. I just want to say thanks. I appreciate what you're trying to do out there and to help fill that space. And it's a little unfortunate sometimes when you have different nonprofits, they want to hold their own space and not let anybody else join that space. And unfortunately, not every organization or agency is going to be able to help me, particularly. So I should be able to go through and find different resources. So I've already been on your website and everything. It looked really good. And kudos to you and your husband. And I'm sure your husband and I chewed on some of the same dirt. I was stationed at Fort Bragg for a while in my career. And, I retired from the Army in 2013, and I still refer to my lovely wife as Household Six, commander of the house. So kudos to you for being Household Six there. And, it's a good space to be in. There's a lot of people that want to help veterans, and I do understand that there are organizations, agencies, and corporations that just don't know how. So I may be doing a volunteer. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and I know you're concentrated on the Southeast. But if I can, offer any help or assistance, don't be afraid to reach out. I'll send you a LinkedIn connection if that's okay.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about this is anybody, no matter where you are, you can help because it's virtual.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely, technology has taken us a long way.
Absolutely. And go Army, beat Navy.
Yeah, there we go.
Hey, Daniel is always such a source of light and inspiration. He's got a good humor, good sense of humor, as you can obviously see that. But yeah, hey, doesn't that help you through life, right? That sense of humor. But
Absolutely.
hey, thanks for everything you said, Daniel. And you're so right when it comes to some of these organizations that are helping veterans. Some of those folks get a little, it's like it's their turf, and they're not necessarily willing to work because they have their space. I don't really, I get it, but I don't agree with it. I think we need to be helping each other, and there are so many ways to do that. And being humbling yourself is probably the first way to go about it, right? And because if we're all here to help veterans, that's exactly what we should be doing. And so, yeah, I always found that a challenge too when I was in that nonprofit space, because I wanted to connect with folks because, hey, if you can help me, that's great. You know what? I'll look to help you too. I will keep you in mind, and when I see something I think would benefit you, I'll make those connections, or I'll do what I can to help you guys do. That's what it should be, and not everyone's willing to do that. So that's a great point. But cool. All right. Well, hey, Paul, you got anything for Michelle?
I got about 2 pages worth of stuff here. No, I'm kidding.
Uh-oh. Well, since
First
we're
off,
at, you know, like an
Michelle,
hour and 30, we'll, you know, kind of break it down to, you know, a couple salient points here.
we're going to chunk this and just take one chunk of it. First of all, Michelle, thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing your story. I know that's not always an easy thing to do, and we just want you to know how much we appreciate it. All of us do. And I think I can speak for everybody here when I say that, because it really is valuable. But PCS orders, permanent change of station. Back when I was in the Navy, you know, when ships had sails on them, we used to call it perpetual circus show. We're just packing up your boxes and moving to the next town.
Yeah.
And anyway, I have some thoughts which I will share with you in an email to you or a message on LinkedIn about some strategies for laying out your website so that people can get access easily and quickly and locally. Critical issue sometimes is if they need help, they need it now, and they probably need a warm body if they need help that urgently.
Right.
A lot of the rest of it can be done virtually, and that works just great, and that's an easy way to access. But I will share that with you offline because I don't want to take the time up here now. I think
Perfect. Yeah. Let me hear it.
friends Scott needs to go, and probably Daniel as well. But and I'm happy to copy you guys if you're interested in what I share with her. It's not a secret by any means, but it's things that well, let me start by telling you that I'm a computer forensic examiner and a cyber forensic examiner, so I'm pretty comfortable with the technology. And I do some computer security issues. I don't have as much expertise in that as other people who were trained in that area, but I sure know how to poke holes in it quickly. Anyway, I'm happy to share that, and I don't want to take up any more time for anybody right now, but
Well, Paul, you're always a tremendous resource in many different areas. You know, obviously the technical aspects of what you do and what you can bring, but then also your life experience and the wisdom, your intelligence, your goodness. These are so many things that are important to have as individuals, and you have them in much wealth and abundance. And the good thing about it is, you know, you're not hoarding it, you're sharing it, and you're adding value. And we are so thankful for folks like you and Daniel who are part of what we do here. And when I say we, I'm saying, yeah, this program, What's Next Beyond Service, but more importantly, what's happening under the Power of Story with Sarah and all the goodness that's coming there. You know, she's got a lot going on, and again, that's why she's not here today. But it helps because there are folks out there that need help, and there are folks out there that want to help. So getting all those folks together and, you know, figuring out who's on what base and how can we do that is tremendous. And without folks like you and Daniel and others that are part of the you know, our groups, we wouldn't be successful. And I know that we're making an impact. I can see it. You know, I can see it in what people say. I can see it in the questions that people ask. And as you mentioned with Michelle about feeling good and okay to be vulnerable in a discussion, you know, and I always want these conversations to be like we're just sitting down sharing a cup of coffee, to where, you know, no one's judging anybody. You're listening, you know, you're not just hearing, but you're listening, and you're not just anticipating the next question you want to ask. You know, there's growth here, and folks are learning. I think that's so important. And so, okay, well, as always, Paul, thank you for what you do, and same with you, Daniel. It was good seeing you there, brother. So, Michelle, these two gentlemen, again, they're part of our tribe here, and I always love when they tune in. But it's, both of them offered to be of assistance, so that just shows you, who those gentlemen are. So that's good. So they're doers, that's like you.
Awesome.
Well, Michelle, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and I know you've got to get off to life because you're in the middle of this move. You've got kids. You were probably ready to go a while ago, but you were patient and hung in there. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for what you're doing. You're making a difference because you've got stories that back up that that you're making a difference. And I will look to connect you with the folks that I had spoken to. I'll do that on LinkedIn. I'll bring us together on a DM. If there's anything I can do for you, absolutely, I'll just reach out. You've got my information. That's anytime. So
Awesome.
go Army. I'll say that as a Marine guy, because my brother's in the Army. My brother-in-law was in the Army. There's goodness there. God bless you guys, and hey, have a great rest of the day. And as we know, this Memorial Day weekend, so all the right thoughts in that area too. So God bless you guys. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
ya.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye-bye.